Hi, it's Ryan from Ryan Fowler Photography, and in this video I'm going to be showing you everything you need to know to photograph flowers in a studio at home. Before we jump into the video, I'd just like to say a big thank you to Laura from Lola's Wildflowers for sponsoring this video. You can find out more on audio flowers on the Tweed and Gold Coasts by checking out the Facebook link in the description down below. And again, thank you for sponsoring this video. Alright, so let's jump in. The first thing I want to share with you is all of this, the setup. So what I've got here is I've got the flowers positioned dead center of the room. It's nice and simple. I've got the brick wall backdrop below. You can see just up the top the clamps that are holding it. It's a 10 foot by 10 foot backdrop, which is held up by two light stands and a bar going across. So it's pretty well set up, and it looks great as a background for these flowers and the lovely colors to really contrast nicely. Next, I've got these two soft boxes here. These are 36-inch soft boxes, I believe, on the long edge, which is a pretty decent size. I've got two speed lights, a Canon 600EX RT speed light there and a 430EX3 RT speed light, all triggered by this remote trigger on top of the camera. The soft boxes are there so that the light coming from the speed lights is diffused nicely and won't come out harsh and give really harsh direct shadows, which we don't really want because we want flowers to have that nice soft look about them. So they do have slightly different power outputs, but I'm going to leave them on the same 1/8 power as we're shooting, simply because I like to have a little bit more power come out of one than the other, although in the final results it won't really make that much of a difference. On the camera, I'm going to be using my settings at about 1/125th of a second shutter speed, ISO 200 and around f8, and adjust the aperture from there because the aperture is what will control a lot of the light coming in from the speed lights. Now here I've got a 70-200 f4 lens on the 6D body, which is a great combination, although the focus distance is about 1.2 meters, and that doesn't really allow for macro. And I won't be using a macro lens in this, but a little trick that you can try is to pick up one of these. It's a Canon extension tube EF12-2. You don't have to get this specific model, this is just the one that I have, and what it does is it sits between the lens and the camera body so that when you actually attach this, it will extend the minimum focusing distance so you can get in closer and turn almost any lens into a macro lens. This works really well with a 50mm, so I'm going to actually put this into the slot in between the lens and the camera so that we'll be able to get a few slightly closer shots as well, which will be quite nice. Just quickly as well, this is an extension tube. There is something else you can buy called a teleconverter, and that is a completely different thing. That will extend the focal length of your lens, whereas this extends the minimum focusing distance. It is quite a confusing thing sometimes, especially if you're just looking into them, but make sure you're looking at extension tubes and not tele-extenders, because that won't really work in this case. So to attach it, I'll just take the lens off of here, pop the extension tube onto the lens, and then where the red line markers meet up is where I will put them onto the camera. Now you do have to attach this onto the lens first before you attach it to the camera body, or else it glitches out a little bit. Just put it onto the lens first. It's very, very simple. Okay, so I'm going to be setting up for the first shot now. So I'll bring the camera across a little bit and flick it on, flick the trigger and the two flashes on. They're both set to 1/8 power, and I can control them from the trigger as well. So I'll put this into live view. I've got my settings on 1/125th, f8, ISO 200 as I mentioned before, and just to find actual focus this way, I'm just zooming out and putting it in live view, increasing the shutter speed so it can be seen properly. I'm going to zoom in until I find a nice composition that I like, and then I'll just use manual focus to zoom in further and really nail down my focus on the white flower that is just sitting on the edge there, so I can actually see the fibers. Okay, so with my focus set, I've come out of live view, I've got the flashes switched on, they're all set, they're both at 1/8 power, so the smaller light is over on that side, and I'll take the first shot just to get a perfect idea of what I'm looking at. So I'll quickly do that, and I've got it on single shutter mode, and the shot looks pretty cool to me. If I zoom in on here, I can see that it's all sharp except for the little bit of fall off in the back, which I like, that's what I'm going for. Everything is nice and sharp, and when you use flash like this, it's really good for these types of things because it makes them look like they're really sharp. That light really just helps add detail and extra little bits that you wouldn't normally see if you weren't to use flash, for example. So this first shot looks pretty cool, and I've got my main subject just sitting on the right hand side, which is the flower, and then I've got all the other pretty colors just sitting off to the left. So this is what I'm doing in a bunch of flowers. So you can take lots of different angles and variations of this type of shot. You can move the camera around, zoom in, zoom out, and I'll probably do that on some of these flowers around the edge just to get a little bit more color, rotate it around, see what's on the other side. Okay, so with this bunch of flowers as well, a nice little trick to add some extra detail and dimension to it, as now that you've got your flashes and everything all set up, is to get a cheap spray bottle. You can usually buy these from $2 shops or wherever it may be, but what you can do is fill it up with water, just do a gentle spray over the flowers, and it can make it look really, really good. It just adds that extra level of punch and dimension to the images. So I am going to do that now, and I'll show you a bit of a comparison of what each of these do to each other and how it compares with the water and without. Alright, with that water sprayed on there now, it's looking a lot nicer. It's just got that extra little bit of depth in there. So I've left my focus exactly the same. I haven't touched it. I'm set on back button focus, so every time I push the shutter, it won't refocus the image. Now if I take another shot, it's now got those little water droplets on there, and if I zoom in, I can see the detail in those water droplets, and it just looks amazing compared to what it did before. Now the other shot, it looked nice, definitely. The colors were vibrant, they came out, they looked great. But as you add that water on there, and especially with individual roses as well, they can really, really bring out some amazing details and quality inside of a rose photograph especially. Alright, so the final trick that I'm going to show you is if you want to set proper white balance, I mean really proper white balance, and this is sort of nitpicky, but if you can do it with your eye, that's great, but to really get that white balance is to get a grey card. Now you need 18% neutral grey to do this properly. I do have a card, and what we're going to do is going to set it up right in front of the flowers so that it's filling part of the frame, so that when we go into Lightroom a bit later on, we can actually select that and get proper white balance for this shot. So when you've got your flashes, your lights, everything all set up, and you're ready to take your final shot, take one with the grey card first, and then you can take your final shot so that it sets the proper white balance. Alright, so I've got the grey card here now, and all I'm going to do is just sit it right up close to where the light is going to be and take another shot. That's now brought up a white frame on that side, and I did do another one just before as I was setting up on the left hand side of the flower, and it has worked. So it's probably going to be the one that I'll use on the left hand side because it has more light. But just to use this and set your white balance properly can be very helpful. This one's got white on one side and grey on the other. That will give me the proper white balance for the shot. So I could take a final shot now and get it exactly right inside of Lightroom a bit later on. We can use that eyedropper tool, which I will show you. But for now, I'm going to take a few more shots of this bunch of flowers. Then I'm going to pull out a couple and individually do some shots, and then I'll show you that black background setup. As I've been doing more of these shots and rotating and spinning the flowers around here, I've been adjusting the height and the angle and the rotation of where the camera actually is in relation to the flowers, because there's some shots that I just wouldn't be able to get without having to look down, look up, look sideways, do a different angle than what I normally would. So it's just very important to remember to shoot at different angles as you're doing these types of shots. Now, you could spend a whole afternoon in a studio doing this kind of thing. It is actually quite fun as you're going along and doing it. So just remember to look at the flowers and look at the angles. And if you think, okay, how would I normally look at a type of flower like this? Like, would you look straight down on it? That's the view that most people are going to see. But if you think about it and think, okay, how can I see this from a different perspective by maybe looking up at a flower like this? Some lovely flowers just under here in this bunch, and these pink and white flowers coming off a vine just here that I can actually look up at, which I normally wouldn't see. And it gives a whole new perspective and dimension to how you're seeing and photographing flowers like this at home. Alright, so now that I've photographed this bunch of flowers, I'm going to now pull apart some individual ones. I might do some with this brick wall background, but what I'm really going for is I'm going to individually single them out, and I'm going to set up a black background that I can just put one flower into and do some lighting with it, really play with the lights and see what happens. I already know what I want to shoot. I've got a visual image of it in my head, so I'll show you that entire setup, and I'll show you what is going on once it's all done, and I'll explain it to you so you can replicate it at home. Alright, so welcome back to the video. I've remodeled the studio, I've changed it around a little bit. What I've done is I've got a light stand up here with a bracket that then mounts another pole going across, and I've got a black A1 piece of card paper. Now you can buy these from pretty well any arts and crafts stores, definitely here in Australia, and they're very cheap. It's like $5 for a A1 roll of this black cardboard, and all you do is just to store it, roll it up. But when you want to, just get some cheap industrial clamps from Bunnings or something, attach to the pole, drop it down, and then I've got another couple of big clamps on the base of it, just so that it stays down and won't roll straight back up, which we don't really want because we want the black background side of it. Now here with the image, I've got the individual flower sticking out of the vase, and I've got one softbox. So I had two softboxes set up on either side just to get that nice even light before. But what we're doing now is I've got one of those softboxes facing up and shooting the back so that the light is coming away from the black background, and it's turning that black card paper to actual black in the photo, which is what we want. Backlighting really does that, and it also makes a nice little sort of halo of light around the flower. Now I've got it a bit too close to the back at the moment, but I'm going to move it forward so it's probably 1.5 meters to 2 meters away from the black background, so that with this 70-200 lens we can get enough compression and the light coming across that the background just completely drops out to black, and it makes it look so much better, and it's quicker for editing as well. The second softbox I've got set up here to illuminate the actual flower, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this one off, leave this one on, and I'll move the flower toward the camera a little bit more, move the camera back a little more towards you guys, adjust the angle and get the composition right so that you can see just what it looks like with the backlighting. And then I'll introduce this softbox up here that's looking down, giving it a nice sort of overall look, and show you how the final photo will turn out. Now I'll do this with a few different flowers. I'll pull them out of the bunch individually, prop them up in the vase, and then I'll be able to take individual shots of the really interesting flowers or make small creations out of the single bunch to give interesting perspectives with that black background. And this really helps to single out individual flowers, which makes for a nice change than just the overall color as well, so you can really see the finer details inside of individual flowers. So as you can see, I've changed it around a little bit, moved you guys around so that you can see more of what's actually going on. And the space in between here is about 1.5 meters. I've pulled this light out just a little bit more, and I've flicked this one on so that it's only going to be showing what the backlighting is doing. And I'll bring up that image as soon as I take it for you. Now this one's been turned off, and as soon as I take this shot, I'll switch it back on. I'll just frame up and focus. Got the 2-second timer on. At the moment I'm shooting on 1/125th of a second, ISO 160 and f9. Now that has come out quite well, and I'll bring up this photo for you now. And as you can see, it's got, you can see where the backlighting is coming in, especially on that right hand side of the flower, our right hand side that is. And now if I turn this top light on, I've already got it focused, so I'll take the exact same shot. And now it's really illuminated the whole flower. The background has fallen off to black, sorry. The background has fallen off to black, and you can see a tiny bit of the color reflecting from the vase at the base of the flower, but I think it gives it that nice little touch of color into it. Now what we can do again is, if we want to, we can spray some more water just on the front, because it has been absorbed into the flower mostly. So I'll just spray that on a little, and then I'll take the shot again so you can see what the difference is. There was still a small amount of water left on there, but now with the difference between them all, you can see that the water is reflecting. So I might actually have to increase the aperture to let's just say f10 and take another shot from there. This is a lot about trial and error, and now I think we've got the right shot. This is where we would do the grey card just to get the white balance. Maybe bring it up to here right beside the flower so you can get the proper white balance. But for this little setup, you already know how to do that, I showed you earlier. But for this little setup, I think it's looking pretty good to me. And backlighting is really helping to just bring to life the details of the flowers along with this flash up here. Now again, as I go through and photograph some individual flowers, create some smaller bunches, I'm going to be adjusting the height of both the light stand that this is sitting on, the angle of the flash a small amount depending on what this height is, as well as the height of the tripod with the camera, simply because I want to try and get some of those different angles. Now if you are adjusting and for some reason the black falls out of your frame, that's okay, just adjust the black, because if you can fill the frame with it, it saves you a lot of time in post-processing, taking it over Photoshop, content aware filling, all of that sort of stuff. It just saves you more time for maybe 3 to 5 seconds of effort just moving the black background. Now I'm going to do a couple of different shots on this flower, then I will change it over and I'll speed up through a little bit of this process just so that it's not too boring for you, and then we can get into the editing portion of this. Alright, so you could see in that quick speed up of everything that I was doing, that I was changing flowers and adjusting the lights and moving the angles and different angles of the backlight and different flowers and positioning the flowers, and even moving the camera closer to fill the frame with more of this pink rose here. So what we're going to do now is jump into the editing portion of this video. I'm going to take you into Lightroom, I'll redo the studio, and I will see you in the next section. Alright, welcome back. We are in the final section of this tutorial video. I've showed you how to shoot flowers with a normal background using some flash. I've showed you how to do it on a black background using backlighting, and now I'm going to take you into Lightroom and post-process a few of these images. Now, I've imported them here, and the only thing that happens on import is a preset gets applied. So the camera landscape, camera calibration gets applied to the images on import, which helps to make them look a little bit more like the JPEG. So let's jump into Lightroom. I've got the images all here, and you can see the ones we initially did. They look a little bit underexposed, but that's okay, we can fix that up. And here you can see the grey card ones that we shot. So you can see it on the right hand side here and the left hand side here. And this is what we're going to use to set the white balance for some of these images. Now just quickly, before we actually go through and choose which images we're going to do, I'm going to show you how to actually do this. So I'll just take away that information by hitting the I key on the keyboard if you're ever wondering what it is. Hit the D key to go over into the Develop module. Once we're over there, we're going to come into the Basic panel. Now here you've got this little eyedropper tool. I'm going to simply click on that, click on a neutral target, and that has set the white balance to what it should actually be compared to what it was. So if I push backslash, before and after it was a little more magenta, it was a bit too blue, so now it's picked up, it's a little bit warmer, a little bit greener, and I personally prefer it. So anyway, that's how you set the white balance using a grey card. Now if I just go through and choose a couple of images, so just flick through quickly, let's just say I pick, I'll take this one, so I'll just hit P to flag that as a pick for me. G is to go back into grid view in the library module, and let's choose a bunch of flowers. I quite like this one. I had my eye on it before, or something like this. This was one of the ones I shot right at the end, but I think I'll stick with this one. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with this. So I'll hit P and flag that as a pick as well. So I'll just come up to attribute and show only the flagged images. And actually just before I do that, sorry, I'm going to come up here and flag this shot as well. So now that I've got those three flagged, if I've got the white balance correct on this, which according to the eyedropper tool I do, in the Develop module I'm just going to press Command C and check None, Process Variation and White Balance. That's going to copy just the white balance, and now if I come across to this image, press Command V or Control V on a PC to paste, this is how it turns out. Now personally to me this does look a little bit warm, so I might take this down just a tad to 6300 instead of 6500. And now we can start doing our base edits. So for this first one I'm going to bring the highlights down just to control a bit more detail in there. Bring up the shadows so we get more detail in those areas. Might increase the exposure just a little to maybe 0.2. And for these white and black options, I'm going to hold the Option key or the Alt key on PC and slide this up until I start to see those little specks appearing. Now I'll bring that back until there's just one speck left, and that's a pure white point. Now I'll do the same for black, this time sliding to the left. Now there's the black appearing just down the bottom there that you can see, so I'll bring that back until it's just a little bit, and there we go. Now to me this is still feeling a tiny bit green. Increase the magenta a touch, and now I think that's starting to look better, and they're only the base edits we've done. So that's before and after, and just quickly again, it's already looking better, I feel. Now introducing a small amount of clarity adds contrast into the midtones. So if I turn that off and slide it all the way up, you can see how that's affecting the image. So I don't usually use too much clarity, just a tiny touch, and then I'll add more contrast. So that will actually adding contrast saturates the colors without adding vibrance or saturation to it. So you can see how vibrant these colors are, and that's from the camera calibration preset that we did down here. So when it imports, it applies that preset. And then just adding contrast and really working it out in this basic panel saturates the image even more. Okay, so I'm going to come down to lens corrections, and there is a natural vignette on here from the lens. If I click that, you can see what that actually does, and it takes away a black vignette. And on every image, always click remove chromatic aberration just in case there is any there. So for now, we're going to go into detail. There are a couple of tiny bits out of focus there, but that's okay. We did have a slightly shallower depth of field. Now I'm going to zoom in on here, which I know was where our focal point was, and I'm going to zoom in up here, which is a bigger version of this, just so we can see every little detail. Alright, so time to increase the sharpening, and you can see what that does. If I take it all the way down and then increase it, you can see how that quite easily gets over sharpened, and it just looks really grainy and horrible. So I'll reset that back down, and I'm going to bring it up to about 40, a tiny bit less. So I'll take it to 40. And that's increased it a little bit too much. But for this, I'm going to decrease the radius, and you can see that that actually makes quite a significant difference. Finally, the detail will go all the way, not all the way up, sorry, but if I do take it all the way up, you can see what happens. It brings out that detail, but still makes it look a bit crunchy. So I'll increase that to about 44 as well. With masking, I'll hold the Alt Option key again, and I'm going to zoom out and just start sliding that across while I'm holding it. Now this is the same principle as Photoshop: white reveals, black conceals. And dragging that across, you want the outlines of what you want sharpened white and the insides dark, because you don't really need to sharpen all of it all of the time, but you need those edges nice and sharp as well. So if I just hit before and after, you can see how much of a difference we've been making. And zoom in on this section, turn the detail off and on, you can see that that's had a positive impact on the overall image. Okay, now the final thing that I add in here is under the effects panel, and I add a vignette. This really starts to draw the viewer's eye in. So that natural vignette that the lens had, I turn that off because I want to be able to control how much of a vignette there is. But with this, if I turn the effects off and on, you can see how it really starts to draw your eye into this area, especially here where the main subject and the focal point of the image actually is. So for this image, I'm happy with that. I like how it looks, how it feels. It's vibrant, it's nice and colorful. I might even increase the exposure just a touch more. And I might take out some more of that green, bring the white balance down a tiny bit, and I feel like that is a done image for what the purpose of this video is and what I would use it for. So I'm very happy with how this looks, and the before and after does make quite a significant difference. Alright, so on to our next image, which is this. Now, I really do love this image. I feel it's got a very romantic, very soft, nice feeling about it. So let's take it into the develop module. Now here is camera calibration. This was what got applied on import, and if I turn that off and on, you can see what kind of a difference it really has. Now, I'll change this back to Adobe Standard, which is what it generally is, and personally I do like the preference of this. Camera faithful. It's a matter of going through and playing with what these actually look like. So I think for me it's a choice between Adobe Standard or neutral. So I think I'll go with Adobe Standard for this one. Just turning it off and on, you'll see that it does make a little bit of difference with Adobe Standard, but really not a lot. It's the other camera ones that really apply. So here we go into this. Now the white balance, I think I'll warm it up just a tiny bit to bring in a few more of those warm tones. Now here, with the separation between the background and the flowers, you can actually really see it because the backlight has created little halos around the entire edge of the flowers, and it really pops it off the background, and we're going to make that happen a little bit more. So I'll add in a tiny bit more magenta, and then I'm going to decrease the highlights, increase the shadows just a touch, hold the Alt Option key, bring up the whites to there. So there's a white point, that's probably a bit too far I feel, just bring that back a touch. And sometimes that does happen, it's perfectly okay just to bring it back. Now for the blacks, I'm going to hold the Alt Option key, bring that down, bring it down again, and that's looking better. So I'm just going to remember -28, I'll bring it all the way down, and you can see what that really does to the overall look of the flowers. If I bring it all the way down, like it makes the entire background black, which is great, but the effect that it has on the flowers is pretty horrible. So I'm going to bring this back down to -28, and then I'll add in some more contrast. Now I might even desaturate this just a touch because I like that original orange color of the flowers. Okay, so we'll go down here into lens corrections again, select that, remove chromatic aberration, come down into detail and zoom in on here. It is a tiny bit soft, but that is okay because we wanted a general focal point within the entire image rather than one specific point. So I'll bring up my sharpness, bring down the radius, bring up the detail, and mask out what is in there. And then I'll increase the noise reduction as well, just a touch. So I'm pretty happy with how this is looking. If I hit the / key, you can see what it was before when we imported to what it is now. And here I'll do my vignette last, but it's not going to make too much of an effect on here. What I'll do is I'll come into the adjustment brush, double click effect, which resets all the sliders if you've got any that are sort of all over the place, to increase sharpness to about 20. And I'm just going to use the square bracket keys to make this bigger and smaller. Select Auto Mask so that it doesn't paint outside the edges. Press O on the keyboard so that it shows the selected mask overlay. And then I'm going to paint in a bit more sharpness on these closer details, because we do want nice sharp details in this image. So around the roses at the base especially, you can see all those lines of where the rose is, and in the petals and everything. It does look good, the veins of it. And I'll just paint that inside. It's a little bit messy, but that's okay, because if I'm going outside the lines here, it's not really that big of a deal because the background is going to be completely black. Alright, so I'll just keep painting. And if you do go over like that, you can just hold the Alt Option key and that will change to the eraser. Pretty happy with that. Now if I zoom in onto here, just look at that, turn the brush off and on. It's very, very subtle, but there's a tiny bit more sharpness. Now if I increase that all the way, turn it off and on, and do the same up here, it's really, really subtle. But that is okay, that's what we want. We don't need it to be too drastic. So I bring that to 40 and leave it there. So that's it for the adjustment brush. I'm happy with how that looks. What I'm going to do now is go into the Radial Filter. Double click Effect, so it resets everything. And then I'll create a radial filter around the roses. And I'll hit O just so it shows a selected mask overlay, but what I'll do is I'm going to untick Invert Mask. And I'll just expand this out a little bit more so it doesn't cover the roses, because we want the roses to be left mostly untouched. And I can decrease the feather, press O again, and now if I change the exposure, bring that down, you can see that the image has gone black in those specific areas. And that's probably a little too far. I might increase the feather a little bit more. Adjust that and hit done. Now I'm happy with how that is looking. If I hit the backslash key, you can see what we've done here. Now I might decrease the amount of the exposure that I did, simply because I do like that slightly off black halo that the image has around the roses. And finally, I'll go down to effects and just bring that down. Now what we did with the radial filter has pretty well done that. You can see a tiny bit of the effect of what the vignette is doing. That's probably a bit too far. Bring it back down to there. Off and on. Just adds an even more subtle brushing and feathering around it. So I'm happy with how that image now looks. To me, that is a finished image. The last tip that I'm going to share with you is in the Develop module. If you press Command C, check all, copy, and then unselect that. Come over to, let's just say, this image of the single rose. Press Shift, select it down to there, and go into the Develop module. Press Command V or Control V on a PC. That applies the exact same edits onto the other images. So this has made it go a little bit, whoops, didn't mean to press that one. It's made it go a little bit darker, and it hasn't changed too much, which is okay. I'll just paste that on. Yeah, there we go. That's that's the change I was looking for. So if I hit before and after, you can see that it's gone a little bit too flat. I would increase the saturation a little bit more, just to bring out that vibrance of the flower. And it's still a bit too much, so I'll come down to HSL and change the purple or magenta. It's just a matter of finding the right one. There we go. You can see how that's changing the color and effects of the image. So I'll make that a little bit more pink, and that's a quick way to go through and edit those other images. I hope you've enjoyed this video and you've found it really helpful to do this type of photography at home. If it's a rainy weekend, you could make it an afternoon project. You could do it on a Saturday afternoon or a Sunday afternoon, just something fun, something easy, and creates different results which you may not be used to in your own photography. Thank you so much again to Lola's Wildflowers for sponsoring this video. Check the link in the description down below to the Facebook page where you can order and have a look at other flowers that you can order for doing something like this on the Tweed and Gold Coasts. Please hit that like button, leave me a comment down below, and subscribe for more videos like this one. I'll see you in the next video.